Hey guys, Whitney here. Welcome to the Global Leadership Podcast, where leaders of all sorts come to grow and expand their influence in healthy and holistic ways, because we know when a leader gets better, everyone wins. Today's guest on the podcast is Dan Owolabi, and he is the founder and CEO of Branches Worldwide, which equips Christian entrepreneurs around the world. He is also a speaker and author. His book is titled Authentic Leadership, which is something that is actually very near and dear to my heart. He sat down with Jason Jaggard, founder and CEO of Novus Global, at the 2024 Global Leadership Summit, where Dan had just talked all about legacy. And yet here in this conversation, Jason and Dan go knee deep in what it means to be an entrepreneur. Now, this episode is for you because you're going to get some key insights inside of leadership in general. But we also know, I know entrepreneurs in my own life, and I know you do too. You can serve your friends that have an entrepreneurial mindset by getting out your phone, sharing this episode with them, because they are going to realize, one, that they're not alone as entrepreneurs, and the value and influence they have as an entrepreneur. So let's dive in and hear what they have to say about how entrepreneurship creates great influence and how we can continue to leave a legacy.
So you're the CEO of is it a nonprofit or a company called Branches Worldwide?
Yeah. So it's a nonprofit with a for-profit subsidiary underneath it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And then so we're going to talk a lot about entrepreneurialism, but can you give us just a brief overview about what Branches Worldwide does?
Yeah. So Branches Worldwide is a global community of executives, entrepreneurs, and owners, and really everybody in the organization, both on the nonprofit and the for-profit side, are really trying to build businesses that benefit the community. And if you're a Christian, we'll talk about redemptive business. We'll talk about sort of building a business that is designed to make a community better and expand God's kingdom.
Yeah.
If you are not a Christian, we talk about elements of social entrepreneurship or elements of social responsibility, corporate responsibility, things like that.
Yeah, so there's a lot I want to unpack here. So when you're talking about like faith-infused businesses, a few things I would love to hear you talk about. One is, I think some people, when they think of like Christian businesses, they think of like a plumber who puts like a ichthus on their van, right? Which is, I guess that's fine. And my guess is for you, it's a lot deeper than that.
Yeah.
So can you talk to us a little bit about what faith-infused business actually is?
Yeah, I will. So I think one of the challenges that I think we face, and I think we're getting past it, is that when most people see examples of Christian leadership, they look at the church and they see, okay, so the only person that I know in my life who is a very strong Christian leader is in the church. And so they look at different ways to lead spiritually, and they're like, well, I must have to lead a Bible study, and I have to lead people directly to Christ. And there's all these different sort of churchy elements, and that's fine. I'm a pastor, so I understand that element.
Yeah.
But when you're leading in the business, or in your business, or you're leading in the sort of the marketplace, what you find is there's a lot of different ways to infuse kingdom principles in your day-to-day operations. It comes down to how you hire people, how much you pay them, the way that you treat your customers, the way you treat your clients, the way you treat your suppliers. There's a lot of the actual products that you create are actually helpful for humanity as opposed to detrimental for humanity. There's a lot of little things that you can do. But what we find more often than not is that people who don't think about it deeply, they resort to, hey, look, I'm going to put a Bible verse underneath or if there's a T in my name, I'm going to make it a cross, so then all the Christians know.
Yes.
And that's, what you find then is that you end up doing more harm than good, right? Because people don't actually feel the kingdom presence, they just see it. And then you're forced to sort of backpedal and try to make things up as you go.
Well, and the point that I've heard you make before, and I'd like for you to elaborate on, when you're talking about discipleship and you're talking about investing in people, which really is what a huge part of business is investing in people. Pastors, there's a better way to say this, but pastors like get you for like 1 day a week.
Right.
But employers get you for 40, 50 hours a week.
Yeah.
And so talk a little bit about just what I'm wanting, Dan, because I know your passion for helping entrepreneurs, for our people who are listening to this, who are business owners, who are entrepreneurs, if you talk to them directly and say, what do you see as their opportunity to make a positive spiritual difference in the lives of the people who work with them?
Yeah. That's a great question, Jason. So, I think what I would say more than anything is that it's important for an entrepreneur to understand the depth of their influence. People go to work, and just like you said earlier, people go to work a third of their life. They'll spend at a particular workplace. And if it's a great workplace, they'll spend years there. just by osmosis, the culture you create really starts to shape the way they see the world.
Yeah.
And they're there every single day, year in and year out. So over time, something is going to happen. They're going to have a crisis. They're going to have a celebration. And for you to be a person of influence that can step in and speak to those moments in a way that says, I get that this is challenging, or I get that this is really awesome, you can actually shape the way they understand the world. I mean, it's one of those moments where if you have the opportunity to do it, it's really profound. And I think more often than not, entrepreneurs are focused on the bottom line.
Yeah.
They're Christians, but they don't really know how to leverage their influence with their employees. And so giving them opportunities to see those things where they're everywhere, but they might not notice it normally, that's really what we're all about.
Yeah, and I love that. And now I want to dive into just entrepreneurialism as a thing.
Sure.
I really believe that entrepreneurialism is like the skill set of the 21st century.
Oh my gosh.
Rapid change, and not even just necessarily starting new companies, but just having an entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah.
Can talk a little bit about what the entrepreneurial mindset is, and then I'd like to hear you talk about, especially for developing countries, why entrepreneurialism is so important.
Yeah, sure. So I think inherently, if you're an entrepreneur, you're somebody who is resourceful and you thrive in risk. And so if you're resourceful, you can see a whole bunch of resources around that really don't have a lot to do with each other. And you know how to sort of pull those things together like MacGyver style and create something that didn't already exist.
Yes.
And then you're willing to withstand ambiguity and a risk for a long period of time to see this thing that didn't actually exist come through. I mean, you did that with Novus Global, like just really sort of pulling all these pieces together and then saying, it's going to work, and convincing people that it works. So that's that sort of essential element of entrepreneurship. But I think you said it earlier with the 21st century and this sense of rapid change, you can't be the kind of person that puts down roots in one spot and assume that things are going to stay the same. I mean, disruption is almost like the norm.
It's the constant.
Yeah. And so being able to sort of see things around you and say, I think I'm going to figure things out as I go, that's an amazing skill set. And it's something that can be learned.
That's right.
Something you can grow over time. It's not, you're not born with it. You can actually develop it.
Yeah. And I feel like part of what Branches does is help cultivate and advocate for that mindset.
That's it.
Is that accurate?
That's it. Yeah. And you mentioned then developing countries. I think what you then find is that in countries like sort of Uganda, I was in there a couple weeks ago with a guy named Emmanuel Trinity, amazing entrepreneur. He's got 80 employees. He's like 32 years old. He's absolutely killing it. And his main skill behind faith is resourcefulness, because things aren't just sort of made for him. He's got to figure a lot of things out as it goes. And because he's able to do that, he's able to build something incredible that no one else can build because they're sort of waiting for the infrastructure to kind of develop. And it's just not coming anytime soon.
No.
He has to make things up. And that ability is really key in places like Africa or India and things like that.
That's right. Well, and I was talking with a friend of mine. You may know her. Her name is Magate, and she this is happening in different parts of the world, but specifically her passion is the continent of Africa. And she was talking about how, like, if you want to start a business, this is, I tell this story partly so that people who live in other countries can appreciate how easy it is to do business in the countries they live in. Like in America, if you want to start a business, you hang up a shingle, you fill out a piece of paperwork, you're done. In many parts of Africa, if you want to start a business, you have to know somebody. It takes years.
You got to pay somebody.
Exactly. You've got to pay somebody. And so part of what she's doing is creating these economic safety zones where they're alleviating, right? They're alleviating they're working with the government to alleviate the bureaucracy so that people can start businesses. And her whole thesis, and I actually would love for you to comment on this, her whole thesis is the solution to poverty is entrepreneurialism.
Oh my gosh.
And the obstacle to entrepreneurialism is bureaucracy. So if we can get rid of that, we can create a generation of entrepreneurs that will create financial prosperity. How does that resonate with Branches? And
Absolutely. I mean, so I was in Kenya a couple of years ago, and I was touring a business that had sort of built itself in that economic safety zone. And it was absolutely incredible to see how fast they could grow when they're in an environment that was promoting entrepreneurship.
That's
I
right.
mean, everything was sort of helping them get where they needed to go. And I think oftentimes in developing countries, you have this mindset of just general corruption, because you're not paid a lot. And so in order to really feed your family, you've got to take a couple bribes on the side.
That's right, yeah.
That creates this cycle where, you really push business down.
Yeah.
But I think the reality is what you find with even, immigrants and first generation Americans, when people come from places of corruption, and they get to the United States, it's like somebody sort of releases the ball and chain, and they just take off. I mean, it's like, holy cow.
That's right.
I can't believe it's so freaking easy in the United States, you know? It's amazing.
It is like for an entrepreneur coming here, it is like they've been like the marathon runners who wear like the oxygen mask that makes it harder to breathe, and the weight vest that makes it harder to run. And then they come here and they take the vest off, they take the mask off, and it's like, bam.
Oh my goodness. I've seen it time and time again. And they're just running laps around people. And of course, in the United States, there are plenty of problems. In every country, there's plenty of problems.
Right.
But entrepreneurship, that's one area I think that the United States has sort of built itself on. And I think it's, a testament to, how corruption can really sort of pull things down.
Which is what makes branches worldwide, I think, so valuable, is because you are, again, advocating for that, lifting up that value, mentoring. I think you do like networking, you connect people who have an itch for entrepreneurialism with people who have been scratching that itch for a long time. Am I missing? Is there anything else you want to say about that?
Yeah, no, you're right on it. So basically what we found is that for an entrepreneur to thrive, they need a few elements around them. They need mentorship, they need capital, they need consulting, they need a community of other entrepreneurs to help them grow whenever they get to places where they want to quit. They need coaching. And so what we found is that when you identify an entrepreneur who has a ton of potential in Ukraine, for example, Andrew in Ukraine is doing an amazing job. You identify Andrew in Ukraine, you say, I think you've got some real potential. You pull him out of that situation and you say, look, we're going to resource you with everything that you need. We're not going to do the work for you. You got to build the business. It's hard enough as it is.
That's right.
But when you have capital, when you have a mentor, when you have all these things around you, and then we say, we're going to work with you for 30 years, the lifetime of your career, because we believe that once an entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur. You're going to start businesses that are going to bless your community again and again and again and again.
Yeah, that's
we want
good.
to be here to help you as you grow and as you blow up.
Yeah.
Suddenly you start to find people really coming alive, because then you're creating almost like an economic safety zone right there in their own community.
That's
right?
right.
You're giving them everything they need, and then hopefully that creates something that grows and changes people.
So two things I love about that. One is entrepreneur. I think most people, when they think of an entrepreneur, they think of a solopreneur, and people do not realize that entrepreneurship is a team sport.
Oh, that's good.
And you create a community.
Yeah.
You're creating a community. And like with the firm, like coaches are all solopreneurs, and so we wanted to create a community for coaches because we knew they would win faster, better. And so again, if you're listening to this and you are an entrepreneur, find a community, even if it's of competitors. A community of competitors is better than no community. Like just do something. And then the second thing is that longevity piece. Nassim Taleb is one of my favorite. He's my favorite Lebanese economist.
Is he really?
He is.
Well, he's my second. I like the other guy.
I've heard that, and afterwards we can talk like Kobe versus Jordan or whatever. But I get it. So he talks about how entrepreneurs are like the soldiers of an economy, which is like on Normandy. A lot of those soldiers died, but they died so that other people could live. And so entrepreneurs, their businesses. Most businesses fail. Most entrepreneurs, when they start a business, it fails. And what I really love about what you just said is like 30 years, which means, hey, you may have a few businesses that fail. That doesn't mean you're not an entrepreneur.
Exactly.
It means you are an entrepreneur.
Exactly. It might take a couple cycles to get it right, and count on that.
That's right.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah.
And so if you're listening to this again and like you've had a few failures, like what makes an entrepreneur isn't whether they're winning or failing. What makes an entrepreneur is whether they get back up.
100%.
And that 100%. Is good. And by the way, and that's good for the economy too, because then it starts to create a resilient economy, and that creates generational wealth, and that changes societies. And I just so not to geek out on you too much, but like when I was doing research on your company, I was like, this is my favorite part of you. You're an amazing speaker, and I love your book, and we're going to talk about that next. But I was like, we have to talk about this stuff because it's so important.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I mean, for me, it feels like it's one of those things I get to do that is literally groundbreaking. I mean, you can see entrepreneurship taking off.
Yes.
You can see the value of community. I love that phrase. I might steal it. Entrepreneurship is a team sport.
Yes.
I mean, that sense is like, okay. And so there's a lot of problems that happen in the world because there aren't enough entrepreneurs to really tackle them, social entrepreneurs, and there's not a sustainable way to fund it. And so if you're able to pull these people together and inspire a whole other generation to do great work, man, you're off to the races.
You're off to the races. I really believe that there's there's no problem that we can't entrepreneur our way out of.
Ooh.
I really believe that.
That's really good.
Because you think about it, any problem that's ever been solved has been solved by an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just keep chipping at it. Just keep figuring it out. Yeah. That entrepreneurial mindset is sort of like a default. Like you have to have that to solve some of the world's greatest problems.
That's right. Okay. So now we're going to thank you for that.
You bet.
So now we're going to talk about your book. You have an amazing book called Authentic Leadership.
Sure. Yeah.
And I would love to hear the genesis of that for you. I mean, you bleed authenticity. I don't know if you could be fake if you tried, which I really appreciate about you.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're just really good at faking authenticity.
That's good.
Either way, I'm here for it.
That would be terrible.
I don't care.
I'm really like next level. Like,
I feel really good.
Meta inauthentic. Like I'm really good at faking
Meta
authenticity.
fake. Yeah, that's right.
That's good.
You have cheap fakes. You have deep fakes. And now,
That's right.
yeah. So, but you are like people who are around you. They feel seen by you. What prompted you to write a book about it?
Yeah, I think obviously the best books are the ones that come out of your own struggles and you're able to communicate the problem and the solution with clarity and with passion. And so that's really where that came from. In the book, I talk about some things that I had been through personally that the challenges came as a result of posturing, and thinking that I could sort of like fake my way or posture my way into some sort of, influence. And what you find is that just leads to just crippling insecurity, and it just gets heavier and heavier the higher you go. So the more success you experience, the harder it is to maintain it because it's not who you are.
Yeah.
So it's just this losing road that I was on, and I found out that in a lot of different ways. But that's the concept, right? That's what you've internalized. You realize you found out solutions. A lot of people have solutions to life that they've figured out over their time.
But would you mind talking about what that failed strategy looked like for you personally? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I know there are people who are living that strategy. Sometimes I feel like I'm doing that a little bit, like you fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
And I think actually you talk about that in one of the parts of your book in a positive way, so we'll get to that in a little bit. But like, what does that look like and feel like when you are acting consistently and habitually out of inauthenticity?
Yeah. I think what you obviously you have a lot of anxiety.
Yeah. Okay.
I think you spend a lot of time thinking what other people are thinking about you.
Yes.
You spend a ton of time looking and interpreting other people's looks. You obsess over things after they're already done. And you're like sort of in the shower, you put your head on the pillow and you're like, I can't believe I said that 3 years ago, or whatever.
Yeah.
And like those are the moments where you realize that you are putting way too much stock in your image of what other people think of you, as opposed to your authentic self.
Like reputation management.
As opposed to your character, 100%.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Okay, so forgive me for interrupting. So now you're about to pivot to why authenticity was so resonant for you and the journey you started to go on and why it was valuable to write a book about it.
Yeah, so it started a couple of years before I wrote it. So I started reading a lot more often. I challenged myself to read 10 books in 10 weeks.
Yeah.
So then I did it and I was like, holy cow, I can actually read a lot. So then I challenged myself to read 52 books in a year.
Yeah.
And I did that. And at the end of that year, after you read 52 books, you start to realize there's a structure to books. And there's good books and bad books. And there's a lot of bad books that are also published.
Yes.
And I'm like, holy cow, people can just churn out crap. Like if they're writing books, then I can write a book, It was that feeling.
Awesome.
And then at the very end of the year, it was a very palatable moment. I felt like God was telling me that I should write a book. And it was the same time we were launching branches. So it did not make sense to launch an international nonprofit and also try to write a book at the same time.
No.
You try to do one at a time.
That's correct.
And hopefully the international nonprofit first, then the book about it. But I was trying to do both at the same time. And it was one of those moments where I felt like if I didn't write it, I was in willful disobedience of what God had called me to. Really felt it.
Yeah.
And so then obviously wrote the book, very challenging to write it because it was the first one.
Yeah.
And then it just took off, And so that was one of those moments where I realized, okay, this is God.
Yeah. I love the book and I love how you break down authenticity, at least partly in terms of, let me see if I get this right. So it's self-understanding, self-leadership, others understanding, others leadership.
You got it. That's it. Nice. Nailed it.
Wonderful.
Wow.
All right. So without even looking at the notes, where I want to go next is you have a really fun way of saying, hey, sometimes when it's okay to like be inauthentic when you're talking, I think it's when you're talking about self-leadership. Is that right? And I would love, when I heard that, I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's unique. Like, that's maybe advice that I've not heard people give sometimes. So can you talk to our audience a little bit about when it's okay to, maybe this isn't quite the way you said it, but when it's okay to be fake? Yeah,
absolutely. So there's two different scenarios where it's okay to be fake. The first one is when you're practicing. And so to get better at anything, you have to, C.S. Lewis talks about this, you have to do something that you're actually not good at over and over and over again until you get good at it. And so you have to sort of pretend that you're a good husband until you actually become a good husband. You have to go through the motions, like this is hard. And then as you're doing it, you're getting better. And so that's like with anything. You have to sort of go through the motions of being a good leader before you become a good leader. And so that's really key. The difference there between, practice and posturing is that practice is activity that's on its way to authenticity. Like, I'm doing this so that I can become this.
Yeah.
I'm not doing this to try to fake it to anyone. I'm really doing this incrementally. I'm getting better every day, but I'm doing it so that I can become something better.
Yeah.
So that's the one. The other one is where you're legitimately trying to serve other people and you are deeply, deeply scared on the inside. One of the examples I give is when you're a first-time pilot. Everyone has to be, if you're a pilot, you have to be a first-time pilot at some point where you're flying for the first time. Let's say you're flying, a 747 and it's your first time out and all of a sudden there's a bunch of, storms and that kind of stuff. The very worst thing you could do is be authentic and get on the mic and say, hey, everybody, we're going into some really stormy clouds and it's my very first time. I hope we'll be well. I don't know how this is going to turn out, but it's my first time. So, hey, I just want to be authentic with you. Like, that is terrible. Like, you were going to absolutely freak people out.
Yeah.
The best thing you can do is just put on a brave face and say, I'm going to do my best we can. I think we're going to get through this, and you get through, even if you're scared. And that's being the best version of yourself in the service of other people, right? You want to be serving other people in the process.
That's so good. So then I do want to go into your speaking career a little bit. So I'm curious, have you always been a natural speaker? And before you answer, to frame this again for the audience, yesterday I saw you speak in front of 100,000 people live, and you commanded the stage, and it was funny and it was vulnerable. It was you had like a gasp, kind of M. Night Shyamalan moment. It's a really beautiful architected talk. Can you tell us a little bit about your process? Is there any? I'll use the phrase that I used earlier. Your phrase is better, but like the fake it till you make it. Like, what was your journey in terms of developing that unbelievable talent?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that. I think I've always enjoyed speaking in front of people. So I knew right away when I stood in front of a crowd, a lot of people get scared. I got energized, and I sort of found a whole nother level of comfort when I'm in front of a crowd. I could look people in the eye. I enjoyed studying it, reading books about how to speak really well.
Yeah,
loved listening to really good speeches, and so that was sort of a natural thing. Both my parents were deaf, and so growing up, I really thought a lot about communication and how to connect with people, because I could see them working really hard in just random situations. They're at the doctor's office, they're trying to talk to the receptionist and she's not paying attention. And so they're doing all these things to like get them to look, and things like that. I could start to see there's a technique to really capturing people's attention.
Wow. And
so I really started to get into that. But
what are some of those techniques?
One of them is not using notes.
Okay.
That's really important.
Keep going.
That sort of keeps people engaged. Storytelling is another huge piece, right? Kinder Hall talked about that.
Yeah.
Pacing is really big. And then having sort of one big sticky point. Instead of having like, hey, here's one point and then like 4 sub points, just have one strong idea. And that usually gets people
right there.
Yeah.
And with pacing, because you have a really nice deliberate pace, is that like home base for you? How would you relate to your own pacing when you're on stage?
Yeah, I like to be dynamic on stage. Like Erwin McManus is one of the best, where he can go really fast and really slow.
Yeah.
And I sort of like to play with that, because you want to find different ways to keep people's attention.
Yeah.
Part of it's the story, part of it's the pacing, part of it's the actual words you use. So
you are a dynamic speaker. I would like to talk a little bit about what's next for you. You gave an amazing talk talking about legacy. I'm always fascinated about how leaders relate to their own future. Some leaders have like a 12-step plan. Other people kind of feel their way into it. As you step into this next season of your leadership with the various things you have your hands in and are stewarding, how are you relating to the future?
Yeah, I think I'm a planner, and I like to have sort of a clear trajectory of where I'm headed. I think there's one thing that's on my plate that I'd like to finish in this year. I'm finishing a doctorate in global leadership, and that's one thing that I'm like, I need to get that baby done.
Yes.
And then I feel like there's very specific things that God has called me to that I'd like to accomplish in the next 3 years. And so I'm working methodically to get those done. And that's really nice, because it gives me a sense of clarity.
Yeah.
It kind of tells me, hey, these are the things that aren't for you to do.
Yeah.
These are things that are for you to do. And then it really simplifies life. It's challenging because they're all really hard things. But I think on the other side, though, it feels like it's bringing a lot of clarity and simplicity. How
do you discern what you sense God wants for you? Like you mentioned the book specifically. What does that process look like for you?
Yeah. It's like a co-creating process, right? So, here's an example. I've got a daughter She has dreams for her own life. She also doesn't have any money to realize those dreams.
Yeah.
And so, my daughters and I, we get into regular conversations about, hey, what do you want to do? What do you want to be? And for me, it's really a matter of sort of steering her in the direction that I think fits her gifts, but also honors God. And then also makes her, the type of person that I think she's called to be, and also fulfills what she sees is what she wants to be. And so that constant co-creation together will really start to shape her future. You want to play basketball? Do you not? Do you want to have these shoes? Do you not? And really talk through that together.
Yeah.
That's what I think the process has gone like for God and I, where it's been, hey, God, I think I see this problem in the world, and here's how I'd like to solve it. And he's like, that's a good idea, but have you thought about this? And so that constant conversation has been real, and that's really where the sort of the clear sense of this is what I want to accomplish has come from.
And I want to park here just for a second, because I do feel like people struggle to sense or identify what God's will is for their life and how to navigate that. When you mention God saying to you, well, that's a good idea, but how about this?
Yeah.
One is obviously it's not, maybe not obviously. That's not an audible voice.
Yeah.
It's not like Morgan Freeman.
God does sound like Morgan. No,
yeah, obviously we both. We all know that.
Yeah.
Like when you feel the readjustment, what does that look like?
Define readjustment. What do you mean?
Yeah,
by
like
that?
when God says, hey, maybe this, maybe not this, maybe this, or hey, when you sense God tweaking, what does God tweaking the idea look like? Is it intuitive? Is it something else comes in and then your heart gets excited? Is it, does it feel, if I was an atheist, would it say it just feels like my heart gets excited about something? And you're just like, no, actually that's not just your heart. That's actually God. Like, how would you articulate that?
Yeah. So I think the way that I would do it, the way that I would describe it is, I would say it's a deeply personal experience for sure.
Yeah.
God rarely comes out and says like, hey, Dan, turn right, like very rarely.
Yeah.
But oftentimes it's a combination of, both reading scripture to kind of get a sense for how God tends to talk and his character and what he would say and what he wouldn't say. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
The second thing goes into the people around you and them being able to sort of speak into moments where you're like, I think God said this, and then them giving you some feedback was really big. And then there's some very, very personal moments where you write something down and you say, God, it'd be great if this would happen. And then it does exactly as you asked for it. And you're like, holy crap. And you look to your wife and you look to your kids and you look to other people and you're like, did you see that? And they're like, I didn't see anything happen. And it's really just between you and God.
Yeah.
Those are the moments when your hearing is sharpened.
Yeah.
Because you're like, I think I understand what your voice sounds like. Because you start to see evidence of things happening in real time.
That is so good. Thank you so much for sharing that. So our last question for you. A lot of your life is about legacy building, and you use a great metaphor of acorns and planting seeds, and they grow into oak trees, and having a grove of oak trees, and sacrifice and meaning. There's a story that our team wanted me to ask you about someone named Maddie.
Yeah.
And can you tell that story for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a pastor now, and then there for a while I was a pastor of a church for about it was about 300 people in the middle of Amish country. So Northeast Ohio, there was not a black person around at all.
You and Dave Chappelle.
That's just me and him, right? He lives
it.
in the country too. Yeah. And honestly, so like they did a census in our county, and I think there was like 0.3%, that was black. And I could actually look at the population and be like, oh, it's just me and like these four guys. Like I really know them. Yeah, right. I know all of them. Yeah. So I was a pastor in this church. And, it was one of those things where you walk into the church, and I was one of the youngest people there. I was probably 25 years old. I was the pastor now, so I had this sort of title. But a title doesn't mean anything, especially in churches like that, when there's sort of long-standing history. The person who's the leader in that church was the person who had been around the longest. So I spent a lot of time looking for the actual influencer. And what I found was it was a woman who was way older than everybody else, who knew her Bible better than everybody else, and had been at the church longer. Her name was Maddie Miller. She was like 89 years old, which means that she was like old when my mom had me, right? She was like 30 years older than my mom.
She's been old for a long time.
Yeah, she's been old a long time. So I walk up to her and I'm like, hey, look, I'm your pastor, da-da-da-da. And you could tell the way she looked at me. She's like, you're not my pastor. like, I have nothing to learn from you, buddy.
Yeah.
But I had a lot of things I wanted to get done in the church. And I knew that in order to move any initiatives forward and really help the church grow, I had to win over the leader. I had to win over the influencer. If I could win her over, then I could win everybody else over. So my initial thought, being 25 and just the situation I was in, was that the reason why she didn't like me was because she was racist, right? So she was like, 5'2", she was white. She had a covering. She had never been around black people before. And I thought, well, of course, she just has this impression of who I am. But I pushed those thoughts aside, honestly, and I'm glad that I did, because that was, really prejudging her. And what I did was I put myself in a position where I really got to know her personally. And so one day I went up to her and I said, hey, I heard you're really good at making breakfast casseroles. Would you be okay if I came over to your house this Friday and we just had casserole together?
Wow.
And so she looked at me funny and she's like, sure.
Yeah.
So, we sat down that Friday at her kitchen table and just her and I had breakfast casserole, and she made it for me. She was really good. And we didn't talk about anything political. We didn't talk about, the church, policies.
Yes.
We just talked about just what was on her mind in her life.
Yeah.
And then I did it again. And then I did it again. I did it every week for like 52 straight weeks, right? Just came every week and had breakfast with her. After a couple weeks, it was probably a couple months, she started to open up and say things that she would have never said before. She started talking about how it felt to be the oldest person in the church and how lonely that was, because none of the young ladies wanted to talk to her because she just seemed like a, crotchety old lady. And she's like, it's really lonely. It kind of sucks. She talked about that.
Yeah.
She talked about the idea of not wanting to get a cane because, in her mind, as soon as you get a cane, it's like you are officially stamped an old person.
Yeah.
But then her health was at risk because if she actually did fall, she was going to break a hip, and she literally was going to be in the hospital for months.
Yeah.
And so she was going back and forth between this social and this physical and this, so really trying to figure out her life real time with me around her kitchen table. And then finally she shared with me that she hadn't held a baby in like years because she was, too old to serve in the nursery and loved babies and held them all the time when she was younger, but hadn't held it in years and really missed it. So then that day I went home and talked to my wife, and I said, hey, look, Maddie just told me about this thing. And my wife said, hey, yeah, do whatever you need to do. So the next day I came back and I knocked on the door and I said, hey, Maddie, I heard yesterday you talked to me about not holding babies. And I had brought my own daughter, who was 3 months old, and gave it to Maddie, and Maddie held her and just started to cry, And I think what I found then is that was the moment that Maddie and I really became close friends, because I realized that influence wasn't about trying to be better or trying to teach her anything. Influence really was gained by serving her, like finding gaps in her life that I could step in and fill, and then really being very, very aware of areas that I could serve her so that she could be everything that God called her to be. And that's when we became really close friends, and things really started to move in the church in that way.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I love the authenticity of that, the humility of that, the generosity of that. And I loved meeting you in Dallas at the
Special edition.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that was good.
The special
That was
edition.
fun, yeah.
And just your reputation continues to grow in this community as someone who cares, someone who serves. And we're so glad that you're here. And Dan, I just want to thank you for your time. Thanks so much for coming in today.
I appreciate it. Yeah, you're a great interviewer, man. This is a lot of fun. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
So fun to hear Dan and Jason talk about being entrepreneurs and how it impacts society. I know I got energy just from listening to them bounce those conversations around. I also know that story about Dan and Maddie, man, one, I could completely relate, because there are people that are just a little bit harder to get along with. And then you're wondering, but I'm here and I'm being called to lead, and yet this person may feel like an obstacle in my way. And I thought it was incredible how Dan said, you know what? How can I build a bridge between myself and Maddie through a breakfast casserole, which, come on, that's some good stuff. And then one breakfast casserole conversation turned into another, turned into just being able to meet Maddie where she was and actually hearing her pain points so that Dan could come alongside. So not only was Dan serving Maddie, but ultimately ended up getting to serve his church. And it all happened through the unique way of saying, I'm going to go and I'm going to be a good listener and serve Maddie. And that is excellent leadership. And that is the person that I know I want to become. And I know the people inside of this community are longing to become as well. You guys, thanks so much for joining us within this podcast. You know that we are more than a podcast. We have our summit coming up so soon, August 7th and 8th. It will be here before we know it. And we have something really exciting for you. We have our best price that you can get, and it ends May 7th. That's quick, you guys. It means you can save up to $60 on your ticket. And listen, we know the value of getting inside of a host site, getting to connect with people, see people eyeball to eyeball, network. So we would love it if you went and checked out where all of the local host sites are around you and see if you can get in the door at our best price ever before May 7th. We hope you join us. Thanks also for joining us on this podcast. And listen, remember that everyone has influence, so lead where you are.